Okay, looks like we're live. Yeah, welcome to the Object Storage Working Group Sync. This is the Americas meeting. Yeah, I already mentioned before, I didn't have that much, but we did have like an interesting development last week, which was that we kicked off the deprecation process for background uploads, which was a little bit of like a last minute decision, but with the big 15.0 milestone coming up end of May, there is a unique opportunity to do some house cleaning. I hope we didn't write checks there that we can't cash because there was, of course, some unclarity. We knew there would be around how to best approach this and like give out some guidance for users who are currently using this. But we just had to make a call, and basically it all came down to given the data we had and that we looked at, it didn't appear to be a highly used configuration. And it does create a lot of complexity in the backend. So we just saw an opportunity there to do it. So we did it. Yeah, so basically what fell out of this is this next issue, which Fabian was amazing. Like he stepped in super quickly and brought up the deprecation notice as well for the release post. So we have a new issue now, which is basically, let's put together some guidance so that, you know, we actually give our users something to work with if they are facing this deprecation, if they need to deal with it. So I guess the question here that came up immediately was how, Jacob already, by the way, he already left some comments around how this could work. I think he already revised this somewhere else. Maybe there's a simpler way to do it. But of course, we should probably test this somehow and yeah, just write up some documentation, maybe a blog post. I'm not totally sure how we usually do this. Yeah, make sure it works and then kind of publish that as soon as possible so that we can give users a heads up as well. Yeah, I don't know if there were any thoughts on this already because it's all pretty fresh. I mean, it kind of happened late last week. So I don't know if had anything to add here already. So like, especially we're looking to, we need a bit more help in like figuring this out. This is also kind of new to me. I haven't worked with this before. So I'm definitely open for suggestions for how to best like do this, you know, maybe, yeah, I don't know, I guess we would have to have some kind of synthetic setup where we connect to the affected object stores, which I think it was actually more than OpenStack. I think it was Rackspace as well. So yeah, we should probably set this up and actually make sure that these instructions work before we publish them, obviously. Sounds like this might be something that could be time consuming. So yeah, what I would ask simply is like, if I could get some help, yeah, to make sure that this like goes into someone's backlog so that we actually do this and get it done. Because it's not that much time left, I guess. Like, you know, we kind of probably want to be proactive here and get this out sooner than later, and not just on the day we actually remove support for this.
Right. And to be fair, you know, if we say it's coming short, that in reality we won't actually fully deprecate it until we have a migration path. As much as we may want to do that from an application perspective, until we have proven paths for all customers, we can't do it because it's not appropriate for us to just outright break huge chunks of metadata.
Yes, you mean not remove it until we have a migration path, because we already deprecated it. Like that already happened. Like it happened as a late addition to the 14.9 release notes.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, for sure. I mean, it is targeted. It is considered a breaking change, right? So we don't have that much wiggle room there, I guess, unless we wait another year. That would be unfortunate because that had been open for 3 years, I believe, this issue. This was not even new, right? I don't think there were any new facts even that surfaced. I think it was just like it kind of, you know, other priorities and all that. So it kind of slipped several times. So we never got around to doing it. So I guess now we're finally looking to do it. And I don't know how, yeah, in like which team at GitLab would be best suited, if any, to look into this. Ideally, like a team that has already dealt with object storage integration configuration, but I don't know who that would be. So that's kind of where I need help from EMs and PMs, I guess.
I was about to ask that question actually. So this is the first time I've joined this meeting for the working group, and the reason I've done that is so I'm one of the EMs now in scalability, and I'll get a bit more context around what we've been doing here. I actually said earlier, I know Jakob has spent time looking into this.
Yes, he's been around for a long time, so he's one of the few individuals who we have to lean on a lot, because he has just a lot of context also around the historic decisions that have been made. And but that's not to say that Jacob needs to do all this, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think he kind of gave you a brief summary last week, and I think the impression I got from Marin when I spoke with Marin earlier today and previously was, I think sometimes when things don't necessarily have clear owners, they come into scalability, which is okay at the moment. I think that's a model that we're trying to make work. But obviously, like this particular issue that we have open, I see like it has been more like section enablement. Like, how have we been divvying this work up so far? Has it just been on like a best endeavors basis?
Yes, a completely voluntary basis. Because this is a working group. It's not. We don't have we don't have formal engineering allocation, right? Just to be clear, like working groups are fairly, well, I don't want to say informal, but like it's maybe a lighter process, right? So it's really just like folks who either have context or some interest in the topic, they get together and just kind of group around it. But this is not something any of us works on full time, and it's very hard to get commitments out of people, which is understandable because everyone, all of us, we still work on our like normal backlog work as well on our respective teams. So it's been all voluntary so far, and like this is particularly difficult because there are very few individuals at GitLab who kind of have a really good understanding of the entire thing, top to bottom. Like, and this is kind of a deep stack. Like this is really kind of all the way from, how do clients initiate uploads? How does this all, how do these requests propagate through Workhorse, the Rails application, and then finally into some upload destination? There was a lot of confusion up front around, we weren't using like the same language consistently, and then people thought they were talking about the same thing, but we were talking about different things. And so basically so far we've been spending mostly our time on trying to actually get on the same page, honestly, like do some archaeology around what has happened in the past and why, write documentation, and kind of, like think about what are the paths that we do not want to go down further. So this is what this falls into, because background upload specifically was something that was identified, and that was new to me as well. I just learned this, like just being part of this working group, that we don't use it for GitLab says it's not considered appropriate for any CNG deployment, and that's kind of what we want to be focusing on in the future. So this seemed like a good candidate to just pick and say, just to like, pry into this somehow. Let's get rid of this, see what needs to happen to do it. What's the impact? Is it acceptable? I mean, we knew there would be trade-offs, and just to simplify it, really, it is basically considered tech debt at this point, is my understanding, and quite a significant chunk as well.
And do you know if like the background uploader as opposed to direct upload was supported everywhere that we supported an object storage backend, or like, because I know there's like multiple touch points with object storage that are sort of separate from each other. Was this something that we supported across the board, or are there just specific forms of file blob storage that support this mechanism?
Yeah, so this is a great question, and it tends to get very confusing when we get to do these discussions because there are a lot of aspects that factor into this, but it's a really great question, and it actually relates specifically to this issue because the answer is definitely no, we do not support direct upload for all of the object storage providers that we support. And that was one of the reasons why users were still using this background upload feature, because they couldn't use direct upload with their particular object storage provider, because we require, my understanding is we require either like an Amazon S3 compatible API, or it needs to be Azure or GCS blob storage. so that Workhorse can upload directly to these object stores. And we probably could add new APIs to support that, but I guess like the idea was also to keep, not let the complexity in Workhorse blow up too much, especially if it's a provider that is smaller than those and not used much. So that was one reason though why some customers were using background uploads, where Sidekick moves files into object storage rather than Workhorse directly. So it was a blocker as well for basically having direct upload enabled for all buckets by default. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it was sort of, I guess, like the opposite of the question that I asked, but like interesting nevertheless, because I was coming at it from the perspective of like, was background upload supported everywhere as an alternative to direct upload? Yes. But you answered it. I think you answered both questions, but I think I just had it backwards, where it's background upload that is generally what's supported everywhere, and we just need to flesh out support for
really
direct
good question.
upload.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not even sure if I'm the best person to talk to this, because like I haven't really worked or built any of this, so I'm also just kind of learning all of this, like just being part of the working group. What I do know is that direct upload and honestly, this is just me looking at code and like talking to people. So direct uploads and background uploads are also mutually exclusive in terms of like code paths through the application. So one will be ignored. So they're kind of like, in terms of like switches in the settings, they look like siblings, but I think they are actually treated as a mutually exclusive switch. So you can only either upload everything through background uploads or everything through direct upload. That's my understanding of it. And also,
so I guess it follows that like anything that is being handled by Workhorse is presumably direct upload, right? And then because this is only something that occurs in Sidekick.
I think this is where it gets really tricky. I don't know if we want to get into the weeds of this. And this is kind of what I'm still trying to fully understand myself and write it down, which has turned out to be way more complicated than I thought it would be, because there are some code paths as well where files do also not go down this direct upload route, is my understanding. Because we have, like, there are cases where we upload from the application to object storage in a Sidekick job, but I think that is not what we call I think that's not what we call background upload as a general mechanism to move things into object storage. But don't quote me on it. But I think there are use cases where, and I can't even name one, but I thought I had seen it mentioned, where just by virtue of something already being part of an asynchronous operation in GitLab, because there is already Sidekick job running, we also upload things to object storage from there. In which case, it probably, I don't even know if it would go through Workhorse first. So I would say, with a footnote, that there might be cases that are not covered by either.
An example is exports and imports.
Oh yeah, good point. Right. Yes.
A user who uses the UI to import will actually pass through Workhorse. It will get uploaded to a bucket, and then Sidekick will pull it down and then do its thing. Whereas when a user requests an export, it'll get queued into Sidekick. Sidekick will actually go through Gitly to generate the export for all the Git data, and then go pull all the data from the database and then export that as a tarball. That gets stuck into object storage from the Sidekick. That content makes it into the bucket, but never went through Workhorse at all. So it all depends on where the content got to, wherever it is, whether it's from the user or from somewhere inside the system. Very short answer on how that comes into background upload or not is background upload doesn't affect that kind of data, right? System generated data has nothing to do with background upload. It is a background job, but it's not background upload. Background upload is specifically user uploaded it, got written somewhere, and then some other job came to the file system, pulled it, and actually uploaded it.
Yes, thank you so much for clarifying this, because honestly, this is something that caused great confusion in myself. at first as well, because background upload seems to suggest, well, it's just like in general, like Sidekick uploading something to object storage, but that's not actually true. It has a very specific technical meaning, which is that it is like a client uploaded file that moves through Workhorse, and Workhorse buffers this file on shared storage. It might be NFS or local storage, whatever it is. Then it proceeds to pass the request to Rails, and then Rails runs a Sidekick job to move this file from that cached location into object storage, which then also all happens in Ruby. So that's kind of like contrary to direct uploads, where this whole like back and forth does not really happen. Yeah, it's a multifaceted problem. It's been very interesting to learn how it works. It's very complicated, and there are good reasons like why it's complicated. I mean, some of them are historic, just by virtue of how things have grown and when projects had been prioritized, and then some work didn't get finished, so we had to move on to other things, which then caused some of that overlap in functionality where we couldn't really remove either of them completely. So this is
what I was trying to ask before I realized I was muted was like, was the mechanism that you just described where the file is buffered to shared storage, request is passed along to Rails, and then the object is picked up by Sidekick. Is that the formal definition of background uploader, or were you describing just some other way that things sort of happen in the background? Like when we talk about background uploader, is that what we're talking about specifically?
Yes, I believe that's
okay.
True, yeah.
Okay.
That's the path. Is user content comes in through Workhorse, and where possible, Workhorse handles everything. Where not rarely possible, Rails handles it and then writes it to a disk.
Mm-hmm.
That wherever that disk is, the Sidekick has access to that, pulls it off the disk and puts it in object storage.
Yeah,
that's what we need to get rid of.
Right. I was just trying to understand if like there are, like, it seems like we're referring to the keyword background uploader as like a formal concept, and I was just trying to tease out whether there are other background uploads that take place that would not be covered under the scope of this effort that we would still need.
Like the exporter, like Jason mentioned one case that would fall into this, which is not considered it's not considered a background uploader in the sense we talk about here, because this is kind of the automated mechanism by which all sorts of files that come in through a web client and make it through the application stack are automatically uploaded to object storage. That's what we're describing here.
Right. So is it safe to say that end user initiated uploads are at least totally covered by this concept?
They're the most common consumer of this piece of code.
Okay.
Yeah. So user initiated, Jason, maybe you can correct me as well, but I'm not sure if that's 100% correct either, because I believe there are cases where, is it like GitLab runner or like where we have other systems as well that might be posting artifacts? So it's not technically always user initiated.
So the thing is, it is technically user initiated even when it's a runner. Okay. So I want to remind everybody that technically GitLab has many pieces of an application, and runner is a client to that application. Yes. It's not actually directly built into the product. It's not part of the
and I should have specified more form, like client initiated.
Maybe client initiated is the correct way to say it. Exactly. Yeah.
Whether it's the runner that is uploading artifacts or job logs or containers or NPM packages, et cetera, these are all client initiated blob uploads, right? Those go through Workhorse, they go through Rails, and then those end up out there. Those are all things that are subject to the possibility of a background uploader. In this case, background uploader is really the thing that puts it to the final storage location.
Yeah. I think the runner logs are like a whole separate mechanism that we probably shouldn't even begin to get into. I think those are like buffered to like some Redis cache, and they're all pulled in, and a file is built, and then that's uploaded or something like that. So it's not exactly
Long story.
Yeah.
It's complicated. We do care, but that's probably one of the things we need to touch least, because it works natively with direct upload now without much of an issue. And if
Okay.
you're honestly using that as a background uploader, you're probably in a huge amount of pain just managing that, especially if you have a large fleet of runners.
Oh, I see. Like you're saying that it is possible to enable background uploader for
I believe
specifically?
so, because it used to be done there. I have to find out what the code paths currently are. Understand that, it's changed a lot over the last 5 years.
Yeah.
So,
Well, and I guess we'll find out as part of trying to do this, right?
Like this is basically, honestly, what 90% of this working group has been about so far, is really like drilling into this, uncovering all these layers of complexity, trying to understand why things are the way they are, what we should fix, and yeah, in which direction we want to move as well. And yeah, it's very easy to get carried away, because there's just so many constituents to this, and this whole complexity matrix is quite large, I would say, because there's so many independent things that factor into this. It's sometimes quite difficult to say, like, also where should we start, right? So yeah, so I think that's kind of why we try to aim low at first and say, let's first, really understand what's going on, document it, and then identify kind of the low-hanging fruit, if there's anything like that, where we can say, okay, this moves us in the right direction. At least it might not be a complete, like, game changer, but at least we know we're moving in the right direction.
That's helpful context for me, certainly, actually, that summary. When I spoke to Jakob about this last week, it was clear that there was kind of, like, I think my naive question was like, so what do we do next? How do we get started on this? And it was clear that there's a lot more, or a lot of research that still perhaps needs to happen. To answer the earlier question about who can work on this or who might work on this going forwards, I think there is an understanding in scalability that we will dedicate some capacity to this at some point in the future. I think one of the things we want to try and sort of do in scalability is give, I guess, or kind of focus on more consistent interfaces around these areas and these challenges in a system where there is a lot of complexity. I think this definitely ticks that box. I think that in part is why Jakob has been involved. He actually put a sort of a write-up together, a proposal. I don't know if that was what you were talking about earlier, Matthias, regarding, I think I've linked to the issue in the agenda.
Is it this one?
The unified blob storage one. No, so there's an actual issue. So I think it goes beyond just the background uploader stuff. I think it's a more
okay.
Regarding this problem. I think you actually have commented on there from what I remember.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think he is kind of keen to, like, in his write-up, to start thinking about what solutions could look like. And I think the outcome of my discussion with him last week was he wanted to get more input from the group on his ideas here. I think he also said it would have been great to have some feedback from Alessio, who I know has kind of like led on this previously. Alessio is back next week. So
yes, exactly.
Jakob is out next week, so that gives Alessio a week to get back up and running, and then maybe can sort of catch him up and work with the group on that. But yeah, in summary, I think scalability is a place where we're happy to dedicate some time to taking this forwards, but I appreciate that this is definitely a group effort. And I also don't want to commit us to too much at the moment while I don't have a full understanding of the sort of requirements of the project.
Well, yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, and if you have any questions, just leave them in the working group Slack channel. I try to answer questions as they come in. I often have to look it up myself or figure it out myself first, but that's why we're all here, right?
I appreciate that.
Well, we're about at time.
Yep.
Technically, we're pushing it right there. Actually, I just read the issue twice, and I realized that that's not quite the same thing that Dan and I have talked about. There's this concept of a unified blob storage, but there's also the concept of single bucket, which would allow a customer to have one bucket that's replicated across regions versus multiples, and or one storage point with one set of credentials versus many things, simplifying configuration, IAM, etc., etc. So I will find that link.
Yep, good point. All right, thanks everyone. I'm gonna stop recording.
I was just gonna say, Liam, I hadn't had a chance to meet. It's Jacob, you said?
Yes.
Who had the other proposal? I haven't met him yet, but a while back when this working group was like pretty early stage, I had suggested, like, I mean, it's much more ambitious than the proposal he's made, but that we could pivot what we currently call package to be like the more general owner of artifacts, and we could potentially even use like the same like distribution based artifact registry for addressing use cases outside of just container images. So like, I mean, you know, I don't know that it necessarily makes sense for like arbitrary file uploads, like screenshots and stuff embedded in issue comments and stuff like that. But certainly for like all sorts of software artifacts and packages, and potentially even like backups and imports and exports and things like that. All the work we're putting into scaling up the container registry, like, you know, could be repurposed as a more general purpose artifact registry. So that's something to consider in the long run.
Yeah, great point. I remember you floating that issue. It was super interesting read. Thanks.
And Marshall, I suggest you meet with Jakob. He and I quote him on this. He calls himself a GitLab dinosaur. I think he was technically the first technical hire. He's been with GitLab since the very beginning.
Cool. Yeah.
Yes.
A load of context, which will be useful for other parts of your role, I imagine, as well.
I always walk out of calls with Jacob knowing more than I did before. So he's great. I definitely second that.
I should sync him up with Zhao from Package too, because I know Zhao has like similar ambitions in terms of like reusing the work that they've put into the container registry to like be more generally useful. And they certainly seem to have like the most experience doing like large scale object storage migrations, like file blob migrations, since that's what they've been in the midst of doing for the past several months with the migrating the entire container registry database and whatnot. Cool. Appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. Okay, we're at time. I'm gonna stop the stream, and I see you next week. Hopefully with Alessio again as well.